ever manual swap a car seat before? Probably not, but we did. And this is the car seat shifter.
Yeah.
So, let's get started. We're gonna design this shifter to fit inside the cup holder of the booster seat. And we'll make the non-moving parts out of plastic. Since a 3D printer is outside of my budget, I'm gonna use a Panini Press to melt plastic bottle caps down into sheets of plastic that I can shape into whatever I need. An idea that I got from the Brothers Make YouTube channel. My first couple of attempts were an absolute disaster, turning out to be nothing more than a stringy, half-melted mess that looked about as terrible as it smelled. But the more I tried, the better it got. Adding some extra weight helped things to melt down a lot smoother. Okay, this might be the coolest thing I've ever done in the kitchen. But to get it to melt down all the way, we had to crank up the heat. Now that we had some idea of what we were doing, it was time to add even more bottle caps and even more colors to get more variety in what our plastic sheets would look like. But of course, no good DIY project is without some drama, and this was where we hit our first wall. It took me months, with the help of friends and family, to even get this halfway full of bottle caps. Caps we need to melt down to make the parts for the shifter. While I was able to make these awesome pucks, I'm gonna need a lot more than that to finish this build. This is the puck assembly from version 2. If I remember correctly, there's like 29 different pucks in here. I made more than 29 pucks, but a lot of the other ones didn't survive. I was able to repurpose some of those by using them for the middle section, which is just a height adapter to spread out the spot between the gated section and where the universal joint mounts at the bottom. Point is, I'm gonna need a lot more plastic, but where is I gonna find that much plastic? And find it quickly, and preferably find HDPE2 so I don't have to worry about what we're breathing in as I'm melting this stuff down. You know? It's just like the bucket says after all. Let's get back to the garage. After hitting the bucket with the angsty coupe, we started cutting it down into pieces that would fit easier into the Panini Press. And it's not the only HDPE2 thing I have lying around my house. Everything from conditioner bottles to laundry baskets. And a lot of people said I was crazy, but you guys didn't think I was gonna let them stop me, did you? Please. Okay, so maybe I am a little nuts, but nothing was gonna stop me from making this thing. With all of our plastic gathered up, we started loading it into the press and melting it down, mixing in different colors to get different patterns. Oh, and adding an elephant for just enough weight to melt everything down. Silicone oven mitts were essential, as the plastic won't stick to them and you can use them to mix the plastic together after it melts without burning yourself. Once we were done with the melting process, we turned the press off and let it cool before checking out our completed product. Now we just need to clean up the press and check out what we made. I was so happy with how these came out, but now it was time to get them into shape. Before using our Dremel to cut our sheets of plastic into what I call pucks, we're gonna take our cup holder and a marker and trace out the shape that we need. Then it was time to break out the Dremel and start cutting. When using a tool like this, patience is more important than speed, and the end results are totally worth it. Rotary tools, just like saws and drills, do make a mess, but we can remelt these plastic shavings down into more pucks later on. Once I got the hang of using the tool to cut things out, I started practicing a little engraving. That way I'd be ready when it came time to cut out the shifter gates. What do you think? Now that we had cut all of the pucks we would need out of our sheets of plastic, it was time to start shaping those pucks to make sure they could fit. I lost count of just how many of these pucks I cut out for the build, but if there's anything I learned from the last time I made one of these, more is never a bad thing. We're also going to need to take the magnets out of the old version 2 to use for this build. We're also going to use a piece of the old prototype to start making our shifter gates. Trimming the pucks down to size took forever. It felt like it was never going to end as I trimmed again and again and again. This is a joke. Don't drink out of a cup holder filled with plastic shavings. One plastic sheet I thought I couldn't save had been made out of a melted washer fluid bottle, but with some extra polishing, we were still able to make it work.
How many go record? Oh.
You hit the record button.
Which record button?
The red button. Now back to getting those magnets out. Turns out nail clippers aren't strong enough to break the zip ties, and I'm not strong enough to hold on to my snips. Just kidding, they work just fine. Next we need to separate the magnet assembly from the rest of the pucks. I spent hours making this, and now I need the magnets out of it, which is fine. I mean, this thing's pretty much destroyed, and version 2 is already outmoded essentially because it won't fit in the new seat. But it is a bit sad what I'm doing right now. Just taking this thing apart. Taking the magnets out of it. To harvest them from its corpse. This build will use a total of 7 magnets, 1 for each gear, including reverse. The reason we're using magnets is because it will create the illusion of a mechanical connection as the extension we're using for a shift handle is pushed into or pulled away from a gear. But before we install the magnets, we're going to need to finish making the gates for our shifter. We'll do a quick test to make sure that the extension can fit into each and every gear notch. Then it was time to start test fitting our magnets before moving on to putting them in the actual build. Here's a rare shot of Kilo behaving and not trying to eat something. Just like in version 2, we're going to assemble our pucks in layers. This will make everything stronger and keep the magnets from falling out. But now, we had a new problem. As you can see with this monster can, which we'll use for a size comparison, the shifter handle from version 2 sits up way too high in the booster seat to be comfortably usable. So, our original design was based off a 3/8 drive extension. That's why we used a 3/8 drive universal impact socket. It gave us the range of movement we needed and helped with feel. However, we realized that the 3/8 drive extension was too big to fit through the shifter gates. Even working with plastic here, we're still limited on space, so we decided to stick with the 1/4" drive. However, that's where part of our height problem is. We need to adapt from the 3/8 to 1/4 inch, which is where this guy comes into play. But then, to fit back up into this guy, which fits snugly on our shifter knob, we need another adapter to set back up. If this was a home renovation show, we'd throw the idea away and hope you didn't notice. But we're just gonna modify it. Boring a hole into the bottom of the cup holder will allow the universal impact socket to stick out through the bottom. That is a great sound. What's not a great sound is the sanding drum almost coming loose from your Dremel and flying around your kitchen. But anyway, with our height problem solved, we just had to make some adjustments to some of our pucks, so that way they could fit around the bottom of the 3/8 universal impact socket, holding it in place and keeping it steady in the bottom of the cup holder. This meant a whole lot more sanding, a whole lot more grinding, and a whole lot more mess. But we weren't done yet. We still had to make holes in the rest of the pucks to allow for the shift handle to move around. Always remember to be careful when operating power tools, no matter how bored you are. Please. Just when I thought we were almost done, we encountered a new problem. The piece of our 1/4 inch extension is too wide to fit inside of our shifter gates when it moves around. A similar problem put a full stop to the project in version 2, but we didn't have a Dremel then, and we do now. Side-by-side comparison, you can see that after a lot of grinding, we took away just enough material for everything to work. So now it was time to clean up the internals and do another test fit. Hold on a second, we're not done yet. We still have to drill holes to mount everything together. Very carefully drilled holes. We have to drill these holes in each section one at a time to make sure that all the holes will line up. It took a lot of creative thinking to make sure that this was going to work while dealing with the shape of the cup holder. But finally, we had our zip ties all the way through. Now we just needed to bore the holes out a little bit wider to fit the zip ties through each set of pucks. Ironically, doing this with the Dremel also generated enough heat to weld the plastic together. And while this happened totally on accident, it means that the pucks don't have to be glued together as they'll be strong enough all on their own. Now we just have to modify one more thing before we assemble it. Well folks, we're in the home stretch now. So, here we go. Since we're going to be modifying this socket, we're going to use a socket wrench and an extension to keep our hands well out of the way of this cutoff wheel. Remember, just because I'm dumb enough to do this on my kitchen table doesn't mean that you should. Always use caution and don't light anything on fire. So just to explain what's going on right now, this is the universal impact socket that's been in the build since version 2, and I wanted to shorten it so that it doesn't stick out so far from the bottom of the cup holder, which I successfully did here with this guy. And then I hit this with a sanding drum after I was done with the cutoff wheel to kind of smooth it out a little bit so it's not rough, it's not going to like catch on anything or cut anybody, and that was a success. So now I just gotta make this one look prettier. We hit the inside of the puck assembly one more time to get a better sloped look, and then it was time to add our modified impact socket back into the build and assemble it one more time. Using an extra set of zip ties, we can use the end of one zip tie to lock onto the other, eliminating the need for any nuts and bolts, keeping this build down on weight. After trimming off the excess, we'll do one final test off the booster seat before installing this thing in the car and getting my son's reaction.